Pastor Brandon and Pastor Casey. They're up in D.C. right now, and Pastor Brandon's speaking at Bishop Greer's church, and they have just been so instrumental in the growth of my faith. And pouring into my marriage with me and Amanda and over our kids. And without them, I'm not standing here today. And I say that from a place of literally not speaking, but maybe not even being here. They have been man, I always tell myself I'm not going to cry. And then every time, 5 minutes in, there we go, here comes the tears. But Pastor Brandon and Pastor Casey, man, they really, really have changed my perspective on who God is, but how I see God and how God sees me. And I'm grateful for them and for what they've done. And now that I've thrown down on the accolades, I got to throw a little shade Pastor Brandon's way, because I don't feel bad about this, because he opened the can of worms on his podcast, Brandon Shank Podcast, Wednesdays. Pastor Corey's on there as well, too. But he opened the can, so I feel like it's only fair for me to have a chance to redeem myself. So he talked, I've known Pastor Brandon for probably 8-9 years at this point, so we played a lot of golf together. And in the world that he lives in, I like to call it fantasy world, he believes that he beats me just as much as I beat him. And he said so on the podcast, and I didn't have a chance to defend myself. Well, in the real world, in reality, that doesn't happen the way that he believes it does. I'd say I beat him 70 to 80% of the time when we play. And let's have no delusions, I'm not Tiger Woods, nor is he. But I just beat him more than he beats me. And in his world, he really believes that we're actually equal. It's not. Right? You ever had something in your life where you know, and then you realize it's actually not true? Or you had something in your life where you knew better than somebody else, and then you find out I was completely wrong? Now, if I'm going to throw something at Pastor Brandon's way, I got to throw something my way, too. I've had that situation in my life where when COVID hit in 2020, the whole world shut down, and my kids were out of daycare, and that stimulus was hitting, and my bank account was looking good. I had tons of money in there, and like any responsible adult, I wanted to spend it as fast as I could. So I was all over Instagram. They knew me. They had me. So they're putting ads all over the place. And my wife had told me to stop buying stuff because I'd already been scammed for $100 out of an inflatable that I thought was on sale. It was normally $1,500, but I thought it was on sale for $100. I thought I had the deal of a lifetime. Well, one more thing popped up, and I thought it was an amazing product. I'd watched the video over and over and done tons of research on it. And by research, I mean I just kept watching the same video over and over and over, and I was excited about it, and I was like, I gotta buy this product. It was this product that these people were showing on these bridges, and there's these rivers that are flowing, and they're dropping this magnet down into the water, and they're pulling up amazing things. I mean, they're pulling up World War I guns, they're pulling up gold coins, they're pulling all these amazing things up. They pulled up a motorcycle at one point with this magnet, so I was like, I gotta have me some of that. I got water behind my house. Never mind do I not know where any flowing rivers are. Never mind are there no bridges near me. Never mind is there no World War I memorabilia in the rivers around here. But I was like, I got to have that magnet. So I bought it. I did not tell my wife. And it comes in, and I'm waiting. I'm thinking about all the gold bars I'm going to have, my retirement plan, all this amazing ancient things that I was going to find in the creek behind my house. Well, the magnet comes in, and it's this. I can tell you this is not pulling a motorcycle up. The most I've gotten is a fishing hook. But I've had some amazing times with my daughter. We've had fun with it. The youth has had fun with it. But I thought I knew that this was going to change my life. This was my retirement plan right here. I'm sure I'll have a metal detector at some point. But this was going to change my life. I thought I knew that I knew. My wife knew better. She told me, but I didn't listen. But I think we do that in our lives sometimes, right? People give us wisdom, people that we trust around us speak into our life, and we just ignore it. No, we know better. But it gets even more dangerous when God speaks to us, and we put the hand up, no, God, I got this. And that's what we're going to talk about today in the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel chapter 8. I'll give you a little background before we go into the first chapter. To chapter 8, but leading up to chapter 8, we have a bunch of judges that are ruling over and really just governing the Israelite people. So what a judge was a person that God would bring up in a time of crisis or a time of oppression, and he would govern the people and help them get through it. God would appoint these people. So you have a 400 span after the time they hit the promised land that they have all these judges in there, right? Well, Samuel's one of the judges that we're going to look at today. And Samuel had an interesting life. The way he was born, his mother Hannah was unable to have children, and Hannah went into the tabernacle and was praying and was crying out to God, if you just give me a child, praying so fervently that Eli, the high priest, actually told her, woman, you're drunk, go home. She was that desperate, crying out to their maker. Anybody ever been so desperate, crying out to God that people heard you, you'd be like, I might be a little bit embarrassed, or maybe they thought I was drunk or something was going on. But that's where she's at. She says, no, I'm not drunk. I'm just crying out to my king. She says, God, if you give me a son, I promise I will bring him back to you, and I will give him back to you. And that's what she does when Samuel's born. God honors her request. God blesses her with a son, and when he's born, she brings him back to the tabernacle, the same place where she prayed that prayer, and gives him over to Eli, and Eli raises him right alongside his sons. But unfortunately, Eli's sons are extremely toxic people. They're unhealthy, they're corrupt, they're crooked, and that's what Samuel grows up next to. And a prophet actually comes and tells Eli that, hey, your kids are going to be judged, your family's going to be judged, and your lineage will be judged. You got to change. And nothing changes, and eventually they get judged, and the Israelite people are always at war with the Philistines, right? Y'all have heard the Philistines before. Well, they go into a battle with the Philistines, and they try to manufacture a movement of God by bringing the Ark of the Covenant out, thinking that if we bring this with us, there's no way we can lose. They thought they knew better. Well, they were wrong. They get absolutely destroyed, and the Ark of the Covenant ends up in the hands of the Philistines. The Philistines have it in their home, and all of a sudden, all these plagues start breaking out, and they're like, I don't want anything to do with that. Give that thing back. Get this thing out of here as fast as possible. And they bring it back. And this time, they're in a place of mourning, the Israelites. They're saying, God has left us. God's hand has moved himself off us. Well, the reality is you turned away from God, not him. He'll never turn away from you. You turned your back on him. And that's where we pick up where Samuel in chapter 7 is saying, you guys need to put these idols away. You need to turn back to your king. You need to repent. And there's a great time of revival. And that's where we pick up in chapter 8, verse 1. So when Samuel became old, he made his sons judges over Israel. The name of his firstborn was Joel, and his second name was Abijah. They were judges in Beersheba. Yet his sons did not walk in the ways of the Lord, but turned aside after gain. They took bribes and perverted justice. See, appointing judges wasn't ever a thing that Samuel was supposed to do. This was always God's task. No judge had been appointed by men. It was always appointed by God. But Samuel took it upon himself to appoint these judges. Appointing someone to take your spot is what a king would do. A king's firstborn would take the spot. So Samuel was acting as if a king would act. But you got to ask yourself, okay, Samuel, you are a righteous man. Nowhere in the Bible does it say that he was an unrighteous man, that he was a sinner. It actually says the complete opposite. So if he's a righteous man, he has all these times where these kids are seeing him be a righteous man. I'm sure his kids were in church. I'm sure his kids were at Sunday school. I'm sure they transitioned into youth group, Sundays at 6 to 8. And I'm sure when they went to Bible studies, I'm sure they were part of the dream team. I'm sure they were serving hard. So how is it, I ask myself, how do these kids go so wrong? Well, the reality is those things are amazing things, and as a parent, I believe, and especially as a children's pastor and a youth pastor, I fully believe that your kids should be a part of those things. But those things are just a starting point. How can your kids go so wrong if they've been in that place the entire time? I ask myself the question, and one thing that I know as a pastor really breaks my heart for children's ministry and kids ministry is when parents say things such as, they're just really hard to wake up in the morning, so I can't get them to church. Or they're just really tired, so I don't want to take them to youth group. Or they don't know anybody, so I don't want to bring them. They'll feel awkward. How can they know anybody if they don't come? Right? And I get this. I'm not throwing out anybody. I'm tired sometimes too. Actually, my love language is tired. I kind of stay in that state. I have a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and you don't know tired until you have those kids. Right, so I get that, but the reality is as a parent, I feel that it's my obligation to put them in those spaces, to put them in the places where they can come into contact with their Creator. And the reality is they were probably in those spaces. But going to church once on a Sunday and checking a box, I would say is the equivalent of getting a gym membership, going once a week and not changing anything else in your life. You want to see physical change in your life? You need to go to the gym and I know I'm not the person to speak about this, okay? I'll stand behind the podium so you can't see this. 3 kids. But you want to see physical change in your life, go to the gym 3 to 5 times a week. Get 8 hours of sleep. Change your diet. You want to see spiritual change in your life. Don't check the box on Sunday because there are 6 other days of the week. if it's just an hour in a week out of your day, you're not going to see any spiritual change. Spend some time with God every day. Spend 15 to 20 minutes of prayer. Spend time in your word. Spend time in worship. Spend time with him every single day and watch how your spiritual life changes. See, I'm not throwing down you guys if your kid wasn't at youth last week or if your kid's not here today. If you're watching online a month later, I'm not throwing down you guys because I get it. Life happens. There's softball. There's tournaments. There's all kinds of things. My kid was at Busch Gardens last Sunday. Don't make church an idol. Make your relationship with God a priority. Make sure it's interwoven to every single thing that you do. Because I promise you, your kids are watching you. We had youth group at my house for a little while there, and we're busting out the seams, so we're meeting down at the beach, again, 6 and 8 o'clock on Sundays. And what was really cool were moments where we would have worship before the kids came, and my 2-year-old, my 4-year-old were just going bananas like they normally do, and in the playroom, wrecking shop and tearing the house up, and without fail, every time the worship music came on, they'd slowly walk into the room, they'd just come, they want to be held. And they would just sit there and they'd put their head on my shoulder and they would sit there and worship. I would watch my daughter, my 4-year-old. I'm not sure if she knows what it means, but I'm holding her and she has her hand up in the air and she's just worshiping. And every time, without fail. And then we started meeting at the beach, so now poor Aubrey, we having youth group tonight? Yeah, we are. You're not, buddy. So sorry. But they're watching you. These kids are watching every single thing that you do. And if your relationship with God is just a Sunday, they will know. They will see. Do you honor people with your mouth when you're not in here? Are you super Christian on Sunday, and then as soon as you go home, you're not? If your relationship is not important to you, it will not be important to them. Now, can they overcome that? Of course they can. Can they steer away from that? Of course they can. My mom had me in church on Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, Saturday night, anytime there's a conference, all the time, every Bible study, and I hated it. But I'm grateful for it now. Because there was a moment where I strayed aside. And why did these people stray aside? Why did Samuel's son stray aside? The Bible doesn't say. We don't know. We can only speculate. But what I'm pleading with you guys is make sure that your life is a life full of Jesus Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It's so important. And we got a generation of kids, and I don't like saying the generation come behind us because they're already there. I've watched these kids on Sundays worship. I've watched this youth group worship. I've had deep, intimate conversations with people that don't even go to our church on a baseball team at Kimsel where they have questions about theology. They're hungry for these things. They're hungry for God. But are you hungry too? I know when I'm hungry, I got to eat. As you see. But how hungry are you to eat? Are you spending time with him every day? That's the question that I would ask you guys. So you see in verse 4, we pick back up. In verse 4, it says, Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, Behold, you are old, as everyone wants to hear, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint for us a king and to judge us like all the nations. Being a youth pastor and a children's pastor, I constantly hear how old I am. The kids are always telling me how old I am. They're asking me if I was around with the dinosaurs. They call me a boomer. They ask me if there was color in the world when I was born. These are real things. Nobody likes being called old, right? The reality is Samuel wasn't that old. He was 60. Where are my 60-year-olds at in the house? You don't have to raise your hand. I see you. But he was probably around 60 years old, and he lived another 50 years. So long that he actually saw the rise of Saul, which would be their first king. He saw the fall of Saul. He anointed David as king. He sheltered David as Saul was chasing him down and trying to kill him. But more than just insulting him and calling him old, implying that he's no longer fit to do his duty as a judge, what we see here is a lack of trust in God. The elders of the Israelites are coming to them saying, hey, you're getting kind of old. Like, we need to get somebody into this place because you're going to be gone at some point. Do they not think that God knew when Samuel would die? Do they not think that God knew every moment that Samuel might get to a place where he's no longer capable of judging these people? Of course they did, because that's answered right here. They said, give us a king. God had always brought up a judge at the right time, at the moment where they need him to walk them through the crisis, to walk them through oppression, to walk them through these things. And Samuel continued to do that for them. But what we see is a lack of trust. God didn't have a brain fart here. God didn't completely forget things. But I think we do that sometimes too, is we try to aid God. We try to help God out in situations. God, I know this relationship's unhealthy, but I can change them. I'm really doing your work by staying with them. God, I know that alcohol is driving a wedge between me and my wife, but the reality is it takes the edge off for me, and I'm a better husband when the edge is off. I'm a better father when the edge is off. God, I know you've asked me to honor people with my mouth, but they deserved it. Or I'm just telling it like it is, right? Anybody heard that before? Just telling it like it is? You know who else tells it like it is? My 4-year-old. That's not an admirable quality. I promise you. Anybody, by show of hands, love being around people that just always tell it like it is? Okay, no hands for the people online. The reality is, let's not make an excuse for a lack of self-control. You know, God could tell me like it is all the time. You know how many times I've messed up, how many times I've failed, how many times I've had to come back and repent, how many times I've sinned, but not one time has God ever called me a failure. Would he be wrong in doing so? I don't think so. I have a front row seat to tell you, actually, I think he'd be more and well within his rights to say so. But I'm grateful that I serve a king that no matter how many times I fail, no matter how many times I let my mouth go off, no matter how many times I do the wrong thing, no matter how many times I sin, God always says, I love you. I care for you. You were fearfully and wonderfully made, and I do not make mistakes. Every single time God does that for me. Has he ever convicted me? Absolutely. But has he ever shamed me? No. Not one time. So let's look back at verse 5, which is extremely important. Verse 5 says, he said to them, behold, you are now old. Your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint for us a king, just like all the other nations. See, having a king wasn't actually a sin. If you look in Deuteronomy 17:14 through 15, you'll actually see it says, God's actually saying that you're going to have a king at some point. He says, when you come to the land that the Lord your God is giving you, and you possess it and dwell in it, and then say, I will set a king over me like all the nations that are around me. You may indeed set a king over you, whom the Lord your God will choose. One from among your brothers you shall set as a king over you. You may not put a foreigner over you, who is your brother. So having a king wasn't a problem, wasn't the issue, wasn't a sin. What was the problem? The reason. They wanted a king to judge them when God was supposed to be their king. They wanted that king to step into the place of where God was always supposed to be, where God had always been. Hadn't God always delivered for them? See, they're saying, I want to be like the rest of the world. I want to be like everybody else. I think we all can have a little grace for that, right? Anybody ever just wanted to fit in? Working with middle schoolers in elementary school and high school, fitting in's a big thing. I remember when I first came on staff, my sister's boyfriend, Cheney, said, hey, bud, you're going to have to step your shoe game up because that staff, man, they got some nice shoes. Jordans, let's go. I only wear them like once a year. I'm too scared to mess them up. But sometimes you just want to fit in, right? It's okay to just want to fit in. But when that becomes your focus and your idol, that's when it becomes the problem. He had set them aside for a special purpose. You'll see if you look back in Deuteronomy, he actually sets them aside. He says, I am setting you aside, Israel, not because you're the greatest nation, not because you're the strongest nation, not because you're the best, but I'm going to set you aside so the rest of the world can see through you my goodness, my kindness, my grace, my faithfulness, my gentleness, my restoration, my hope, my peace. And what did Israel say? No, I want some of that out there. I think we've all been there before, right? He made a covenant with his people, and his people are saying, no, I don't think so. We want to be like the world. And the question I would ask you guys, when people look at you, do they see the world or do they see a Christ follower? You might say, I don't even know what a Christ follower is. Well, as Pastor Brendan would say, I'm glad you asked. In John 13, 34 through 35, you'll see Jesus says, a new commandment I give to you, that you will love one another just as I have loved you. You are also to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. Do you have grace for people? Are you quick to the temper? Are you ready to fire off on people immediately? Because I know I've been there. I know the struggle with that is a real thing. And the Bible is real when it says that you need to die to yourself daily. Because sometimes being nice to people makes me feel like I'm going to die. I don't want to have to deal with that. I'm so tired. Being nice to someone, I could possibly kill me. Anybody been there? You're just so exhausted. Like, I don't have time to people right now. Right? All the parents said amen. But when people look at you, are they seeing love or are they seeing the world? Or when people look at you, are they seeing joy and peace or are they seeing the world? When people look at you, are they seeing hope and restoration or are they seeing the world? I know I told my wife, I've been telling her the last couple of months is, I'm just so frustrated. Like, people just seem so mean all the time. Like, why has everybody got to be so rude? I'm a great person. I'm never unkind to people. I'm awesome. Like, why would they be rude to me or unkind to me? That's what the world has to offer. That's the best that the world can give. I know being a follower of Christ isn't the easiest thing that anybody's ever done. The Bible has no delusions about that and doesn't necessarily say that it will be the easiest thing in the world. But I know for me, I lived in both the world without Christ and I live in the world with Christ. There's quite a difference between the two for me. What the world told me I needed a great job, check. I needed to make a lot of money, check. You need a wife, a beautiful wife, check, check. Kids, family, house, degrees, all the things the world will tell you that will make you happy. Check, 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 check. Well, if I had everything that I needed and everything the world told me that would make me happy, why would I lay in bed at night secretly battling depression and suicidal thoughts? See, that's the best the world had to offer me. A couple of years ago when I finally decided to give my life back over to the Lord, things drastically changed for me. A better husband, better father, better brother, better son, better friend. I'm just the best version of myself. And yes, I still make mistakes. Yes, I still struggle. Yes, some of those thoughts try to jump into my head sometimes. But that's the goodness of God. The goodness of God is that he allows you to make that choice. Will you choose the world or will you choose me? Are you going to choose the world or are you going to choose him? That's a question that I have to wrestle with daily. I think it's a question that all of us wrestle with daily. I think all of us that would say we're Christians, yeah, of course I choose God. But what does that actually mean? Are your actions showing that? Is the way you talk to people showing that? Is the way you honor your wife and honor your kids? Do you spend time with him? These are all questions that I have to ask myself. Every question I'm asking you, I've wrestled with myself. Every question I'm asking you, I've struggled with myself. Every question I'm asking you, God's had faith with me or had grace for me in these things. And we'll see back in verse 6, we'll pick up with our buddy Samuel. Samuel is, in verse 6, it says, but the thing displeased Samuel when they said, give us a king to judge us. And Samuel made a Facebook post. No? That's a different version? Okay. And Samuel called his friends to vent. No. And Samuel gave him a piece of his mind. No. What does it say? And Samuel prayed to the Lord. How different would our lives be if the moments where we were frustrated, the man just got called old, was told his kids were terrible, and they threw down on his king. I think that's a legitimate reason to be frustrated. But what did he do? He went to prayer. How much different would our lives be in the moments where we're frustrated, when we're angry, when we're hurt, when we're discouraged, when we're scared, when we're jealous, when we're tired? How much different would our life be if we focused on prayer in those moments instead of focusing on what the world can offer in those moments? I know for me, it was a big struggle and challenge for me with that is I remember there was a time where I would be frustrated with people and I would say, okay, well, my wife is my spouse. She's my number one. The two are never separated. So I would come home and I would not vent, but I would just explain to her the situations that I'm in. I was frustrated with people, how these things in my life weren't going the way they were supposed to because of people. How I've told this person to do that, but they won't listen. How nobody sees this or nobody sees that. Well, the problem with that is I would move on from that situation and there would be resolution and restoration, but I wouldn't communicate that with my wife. So now her view of that person is skewed and changed, and they see them in a different way. Instead of taking it to the Lord, the person that could actually change my heart and help me walk through that situation, I plant a seed of bitterness in my wife. And I know she's had to learn that with me as well, because if she shares something with me, nobody holds a grudge like me. Nobody. I'm still thinking about something that happened in pickup basketball 2 weeks ago. Hey, but God's working on me. And God has grace for me too. God forgives me. God sees me. God still loves me. God still cares for me in that time. I had a moment this February where I had to put this into action. And as we're planning for the move here, there were a lot of moving pieces. There was storage. There were storage units. There were trailers. There was getting out an open door. There was throwing stuff away, taking it to the dump. There were budgets. There was kids camp coming up. There was Christmas Eve services. There was the move. There was all these things over and over and over and over. And the stress was through the roof. And I fancy myself a person that can handle stress pretty well. But as we got ready for the launch, we wanted everything to be perfect for anybody that walked through this door. So the stress just started overwhelming me to a place where I started being unwell. There were nights between 5 and 6 o'clock, and my wife can attest this, where my body would just start to shut down. I would start shaking uncontrollably because I was so cold, teeth chattering, but never had a fever. So the first night, just went to bed, took some NyQuil, I'll be good tomorrow. Woke up, felt okay. 5 o'clock hit, boom, body starts shutting down. Shaking, cold, teeth chattering. Okay, well, maybe I just have a little bit of a bug. Day 3, same thing. Day 4, same thing. Day 5, same thing. And what turned from a moderate inconvenience into frustration then turned into fear. As I was spending time with doctors and having them run tests on me because I didn't know what was wrong with me, and it slowly started to affect me during the day, where if I just did something with moderate activity, I was profusely sweating, and I was just getting overwhelmed, and I was scared. It started to cause tension in my home because Amanda, for all intents and purposes, was a single mom come 5 o'clock. My body shut down. I had to just go lay down and cover myself up. And I remember in a night, it was probably 3 weeks in, where I'm laying in bed with the blanket up to my nose, just covering myself because I'm so cold. Never had a fever, though. And I'm shaking, and I'm just crying out to the Lord, crying, sobbing. Like, God, I'm over this. I'm frustrated. I'm tired. Like, I want to be a better dad. I want to be a better husband. Like, why is this happening to me? Like, what's going on? And I remember in that moment, God telling me it's not physical, it's mental. Like, okay, well, what do you mean? It's the stress. No way, it can't be stress. Like, I've worked in a high-stress environment before I came here. There were people cussing me out and yelling at me and go, 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 and the stress was through the roof, but never did I have a breakdown like this. But what I realized and God revealed to me in that time is, yes, you have been in high-stress environments, but what did you do when you were stressed out? I'd have a drink. I'd go smoke a cigarette. I'd go out with the boys to burn off some steam. I'd get into things I shouldn't be looking at. And all these things I had now removed from my life, but I hadn't backfilled them with what can actually help me in those moments. I hadn't allowed God to take the place of what those inebriators would do to push down my stress. Instead, I was just pushing it down to a place and not dealing with it and not giving it over to God in a moment where I said, God, like, I need you in this time. I don't know what else to do. God, I'm frustrated. I'm stressed out. I'm angry. I'm tired. God, I need you. And I think for some people, maybe in here today, maybe there's those things that you just do to take the edge off. And maybe it's not sin. Maybe it's a video game. Maybe it's social media. Maybe it's TV. Maybe it's food. Maybe it's a sport. But maybe it is alcohol. Maybe it is pornography. Maybe it is a drug that you use to help inebriate yourself. You're not a terrible person. You're a human. I think God wants to say to some people today, he's not mad with you. He's not angry with you. He's not disappointed with you. He's not frustrated with you. That he loves you. And he wants you to allow him to take the space of those things. You see, some of those things I mentioned aren't a sin in the same way that them asking for a king wasn't a sin. It was why they were asking. Why are you doing these things? Why are you allowing that addiction to take the place of your king? You see, I'm grateful for people like Pastor Corey and Pastor Brandon and Pastor Matt and that were able to speak into my life during those times. The same way that those elders came to Samuel and said, like, hey, something's wrong with your sons. Now, their choice afterwards wasn't the right one, but they were willing to speak into his life. And I had people that were speaking into my life during those things. Because very few people knew I was walking through those things. And I don't share those things with you to say, boo-hoo, look at me. I share those things to say with you, I'm a pastor on staff, and I still have to walk through these things. I still struggle through these things, these moments of giving everything over to God. I'll never get it right. I'll never have it perfect. But luckily, I serve a God that doesn't ask me to get it perfect. He just says, give it to me. Are there habits in your life that are taking the place of that? Taking the place of your king? We'll see in verse 7 and 9 as we continue to go through the book of Samuel, chapter 8, verses 7 through 9, we see, and the Lord said to Samuel, obey the voice of the people and all that they say to you. For they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them. According to all the deeds that they have done from the day I brought them up from Egypt, even to this day, forsaking me and serving other gods, so that they are also doing to you. Now then, obey their voice. Only you shall solemnly warn them and show them the ways of the king that will rule over them. I mean, it seems a little bit unfair, I would say, if you're reading the story and looking at the big picture of, hasn't God been good to them? Hasn't God taken care of them? Hasn't God taken them out of Egypt? Hasn't God provided them manna in the wilderness and water in the wilderness? Hasn't he given them the 10 Commandments, guiding them with a pillar of cloud and fire, bringing them to the promised land, a conquest over Canaan, victory over the Amalekites, water from rocks, victory over Sihon and Og, victory over the Midianites, leadership through the judges, victory over the Philistine gods, victory over the Philistines just one chapter before. But what you see in the Bible is a trend of people constantly rejecting their king, all the way to the point where they reject their physical king and King Jesus. And we can judge them, and we can tell them, how can you not get this right? But I think I need to look at myself sometimes and say, this is you. Constantly giving you amazing things, constantly blessing your life, but constantly I say, God, I got this. I want to be a little bit more like the world. You see, Samuel must have been devastated at this moment. Like I said, they were calling him old. They're throwing down on his kids. They're throwing down on his king. But what does God do? He comforts them. No, Samuel, this isn't about you. This is about me. And like I shared with you, the frustrations that I have with people oftentimes that I shared with my wife, people just being nasty, people being rude, I have to sit in that moment and listen to God say, no, buddy, that's not about you. They're rejecting me. Whether they know it or they don't know it, they've allowed the world to tell them what will help them in that moment. Instead of allowing me to fill that space, they're filling it with alcohol, with drugs, with relationships, with degrees, with success, with money, with houses, with kids, with sports, with athletics. And the best the world can give you is what you're seeing. I think I need to have more grace for people. I think we all need to have more grace for people. I've had people in my life experience and watch situations happen in my life and tell me, man, you're a better man than me, because in that situation, I would have fill in the blank with whatever. The reality is probably one of two things. I wanted to say that, but I bit my tongue. Or what I hope to get to, and what sometimes I do get to, is a place where I'm walking so close to my King where those things don't really bother me anymore. Because instead of seeing the hurt they're trying to inflict on me, I see the hurt inside. I see people that need a King just as much as I do. And we go on to verses 10 and 19, and we'll read them in a moment, but as any good parent does, they give them a stern warning. I remember my little brother who's here today. My mom's always had motorcycles, and the motorcycle was in the backyard, and it was on, and she tells him, don't touch that muffler. Okay. Don't touch that muffler. Okay. She leaves, and CW sees him and watches him smile and grab the muffler. Hand burnt. As any good parent, she gave him the warning. God gives him a warning. Because what they are saying is that this King will fix our problems, and God's saying no more problems will come. God gave them permission to move forward, but permission isn't always approval. I think some people need to hear that today, that permission does not always mean approval in your life. I think we're so earnest to have a move of God in our life, to have something change in our life, that we kick down doors that we're not ready to walk through yet. God, I'm just so lonely. I just need a boyfriend or girlfriend. Match on Tinder. That must be you. Lord, I'm so unhappy in my current work position. I just need a change. Job offer, even though I applied for 47 different places. Must be you, God. I think sometimes we try to manufacture a move of God in our life because we're just unhappy with the current circumstances in our life. Can those things be God? Of course they can. Can God bless those things after the fact, even after you did? Yes, he did with the King David, who through that line, Jesus came. Because you see, Saul was the first king, but then who came next? David. And through that line came Jesus. So even that they were crying out for a king and it wasn't the right time, God allowed it, and it caused them grief and it caused them headache, but he still was able to fix things when they were willing to submit. You see, oftentimes I think that we know what we want, but God knows what we need. How many times in your life have you desperately wanted something and look back on it 10 years later and say, thank you, God, for not giving that to me? It would have destroyed me. I know for me, I've had a girlfriend from 5th grade all the way through high school, and I'm married now, no girlfriends now, but I always had a girlfriend, and every single one I was going to marry. Everyone. And I look back now and say, God, and I remember, my mom can attest to this, the times where I would break up with a girl, or a girl would break up with me, and I'm crying thinking she was the one in 6th grade. But I look back now, I'm like, good Lord, that would have been a disaster. And I actually prayed to God, God, just bring her back to me. We've been dating for 2 weeks. She's the one. Oh, I'm grateful that he didn't honor my request. If he does, there's no me and Amanda, there's no Aubrey, there's no Cora, there's no Emmett. But they wanted a king, and let me tell you what a king does. Let's read through verses 10 through 19. So Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking for a king from him. He said, these will be the ways of the king who will reign over you. He will what? Take your sons and appoint them to his chariots and to be his horsemen and to run before his chariots. And he will appoint to himself commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and some to plow his ground and to reap his harvest, and to take his implements of war and the equipment of his chariots. And he will what? Take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards, olive orchards, and give them to his servants. He will take the tenth of your grain. He will take a tenth of your grain and of your vineyards and give it to his officers and to his servants. He will take your male servants and female servants and the best of your young men and your donkeys and put them to his work. He will take a tenth of your flocks. You shall be his slaves. And in that day, you will cry out because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves, but the Lord will not answer you in that day. But the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel. And they said, no, there shall be a king over us. See, what the world had to offer was a king, and what was he going to do? He was going to take. And I think there's people here today that feel like maybe the world has been taking. But when Jesus came, what did he say? Son of Man didn't come to be served, but what? To serve. The best the world has to offer is they're just going to take. What our King offers, he's going to give. He's going to give you restoration in your marriage. He's going to give you a hope that you thought wasn't possible anymore. He's going to give you your life back after that addiction. He's going to give you a joy and a peace that surpasses understanding. He's going to remove a bitterness or an anger towards people that has separated you from him. He's going to give you life and give it to you abundantly. You see, this past week when we were at camp, we took about 30 kids, 28, I believe, and 34 people total. So second year going, so I knew how God was supposed to move. I knew what he was going to do there. I told the chaperones how it was going to happen. I told the chaperones what to be prepared for. I told them exactly the way that God was going to move because I knew. The year we went before, I'd say it was a 10 out of 10. The speaker was incredible. He had such a gift with the kids at the time of altar of navigating them through that, navigating the chaperones through that. The worship team was amazing. The energy was through the roof. The food was amazing. Everything was a 10 out of 10. I was ready for a 20 this year. So day one, we get there and things don't go the way I expected it to go. Okay, everybody's just kind of wound up. You know, it's first time camp for some people. Day two doesn't go the way I expected to go again. Okay, day two, there's still 2 nights left. No problem. We got this, God. We got this. Day three, nothing happens the way I expected to happen again at the services. Hope turned to frustration, started to turn to bitterness. I remember having conversations, well, maybe not conversations, I was too scared to think it or say it loud, but they were there. God, we brought more people for you. We brought more chaperones. We prepared better for you. Where are you at? Why aren't you moving the way that I expect you to? I remember on the last day, I'd kind of just given up hope and I was frustrated and I was tired, 37 monsters deep. I remember saying, God, I'm dropping my expectations. You move how you want to move. And let me be clear, God did not need my permission to move. What I needed from him was the ability to see that he already was. First day of camp, young boy was there, and we're about to eat, and I asked anybody if they're willing to pray, and of course nobody volunteers, and so he's the only one that made eye contact with me. So I asked him to pray, and he told me, I don't know how to. I don't pray out loud. So I walked him through it and kind of explained what prayer was, and he did it. And every meal after, I asked, does somebody want to pray us first? He was the first one to have his hand up every time. I don't know if it was night 2 or night 3. The altar time's happening, and this same young man brings his sister up for prayer. She's on the other side of the building, so he went out of his way to go grab that young girl and brings her up and says, I need you to pray for her. And I'll respect their privacy, but it was a pretty intense prayer. I told him, yeah, absolutely, I'll definitely pray over her, but I want you to pray over her too. I saw the fear start to overwhelm him, and he says, I don't know how to pray. And I walked him through it again. He prayed over her. Last night at camp, he's praying over kids that he made friends with at camp. I look over, and one of our third graders is walking from boy to boy praying over them. I look over on the other side of the room. All of our girls are huddled up praying over each other. The camp director shared with me after that there was a young man that was standing next to me. I don't know if he was with me or, because I still don't know who it was or was with our camp, but he said every time your hands went up in worship, his hands went up. Every time your hands went down, his hands went down. I'm getting text messages from parents after camp telling them how amazing it was, how their kids can't stop talking about it, what God's done in their life, how they can't wait till next year. And I almost missed it. Because I knew how God was supposed to move, what he was supposed to do, how he was supposed to minister to these kids. But in the moment when I said, God, I'm dropping my expectations, nothing changed but my perspective. He's always going to move. But I think there's some people in here tonight that maybe are frustrated with the way that God hasn't moved in their life. Or maybe they're frustrated with how he did move in their life. Maybe there's people in here today that have allowed those things to take the place of what God was supposed to take the place of. Maybe there's some bitterness in people. Some terrible things have happened to you. Maybe there are people that are suffering through addiction secretly that nobody knows about, that they don't know any way out of. Maybe there's some people in here that haven't even given their life over to Christ before. Maybe there's people in here today that have given their life over to Christ, but they're saying, I'm not willing to give you all yet. And I would ask today, as those kids charged the altar at camp, hundreds of kids down front, would you come up today and allow us to pray with you? Would you guys stand with me? If that's you today, you're saying, I want prayer, just come down to the altar. If you're saying, God, I want to give everything over to you. God, there's bitterness in my heart. There's anger in my heart that I don't know how to let go of. There's frustration in my life. God, you haven't moved in the way that I expected you to move. Or you did move in a way that I didn't expect. Our prayer team will come up behind you, and I would just ask if that's you today, would you just come up to the front and allow people to pray with you? But as those kids did at camp, pray yourself. And if you're not sure what that looks like, just have a conversation with God. It's just like me talking to you right now. Are you allowing God to take that place in your life that is the most important place in your life? Do you have resentment, anger, and frustration with things that haven't happened in your life that's allowed you to push them to the side? that's you. I want to pray with you today. If you could come down to the front, our team will pray behind you. Lord, I just thank you for every single person in this room. I thank you for your goodness. I thank you for your kindness. I thank you for your gentleness. Lord, I thank you in the moments where we've said that you being our King isn't good enough. It didn't deter you from us. It just made you chase us harder. Lord, I thank you for the grace that you've given me. Lord, I pray over any person in this room that's suffering over a secret addiction that nobody knows about. Lord, I pray over anybody in this room that has got an anger or bitterness because things didn't work out the way that they had hoped. And that anger and that bitterness has driven a wedge between them and you. Lord, I pray today that you start working on their hearts. Lord, I pray today that as a king that gives, you start giving people restoration today. That you start giving people hope back that they thought wasn't possible. That you start giving them joy that they thought wasn't possible. Lord, as people were telling Samuel that he's on the back end of his life and he's no longer valuable, I pray for people today that are saying, maybe I have nothing left to give. Lord, I just pray for every person in this room today that's willing to give everything over to you. As those kids at camp were willing to charge the altar and say, I'm giving you everything. I pray over the people that are saying, that's what I'm doing today. Would you move in their life the way that only you can? Holy Spirit, would you overwhelm them in this place? Show them that they are loved, they are valued, that you're not ashamed, upset, angry with them, but they're your children. That you love them, that you care for them, that you will always be there for them. Lord, we thank you for who you are. If you never did another thing for us, it would be more than enough. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss any new content or videos, and tell all your friends. Also, we're here live every Sunday. We'll see you soon.